I compute. Right, hello, I'm with Alexander Adams, who is an artist and writer. He's written mainstream books about Magritte, but also, more experimental stuff. And he's got a novel coming out. Is it out already? Just about out.
It came out yesterday. The day X crashed was the day I launched my first novel.
How
So that's fun.
appropriate. Okay, so this is Alexander's first novel. It's called The Naked Spur, and it was published by Exeter House Publishing, who I hadn't really come across before, but I'll put a link to it. And there is an accompanying collection of paintings called Noctes, which has a sort of interesting and oblique and ambivalent relationship to the novel, which if people see, they'll come to understand what that's about. And yeah, you're doing a launch at Verdurin, which is in East London, Old Street. I'll put a link to that on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday. So that's the 20, whatever it is, 28th.
28th.
What?
The 28th.
28th. Yeah, exactly. Right. So, and anyone who's in London should come along and check it out. We're going to have a discussion with Alexander, with Pierre Dalancert, who runs Verdurin. And in any case, it's a great place to come and sort of talk to people freely. It isn't beholden to any of the sort of tyrannies and terrors of contemporary life. At least we hope not. Maybe we'll invent some new ones. But in any case, so I thought I'd have a quick conversation with Alexander about, well, anything he wanted to talk about. But perhaps the novel was written a while ago now, so 2007, 2008, something like this. And it captures, I think, this period, right, very well. It's about trying to make art in London, and the sort of combination of economic pressure, the sort of mundanity of the city, the sort of seedy aspects of, well, I mean, the less seedy aspects seem to be the actual art, which is sort of to do with painting nudes, but the seediness of the city itself is kind of much more powerful. It's written in this quite sort of not exactly flat tone, but sort of uh, unemotional way, perhaps. I wonder if you could perhaps begin by reflecting on how this novel, which is coming out now, obviously, set in this period, and now we're in 2025, whatever that means, and the sort of certain kind of chaos, maybe, but maybe life is always chaotic. I don't know. Everyone always thinks like it's going to be their end of the world, or things are particularly specific to their period. But yeah, just if you could set out your feeling about the novel and now.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me on. Yeah, the novel was written in 2007. It's actually based on personal experience. It's not 100% true. It's largely true.
Mm-hmm.
And it's set in London in the sort of 2000 to 2003 period. But it was actually written a few years later. But the weird thing is, of course, that it actually turned out to be almost 20 years before I decided to publish it, because I didn't have any audience at the time. I mean, the book is kind of about an artist who's losing his audience and losing his direction. He starts off, he's paying for his studio by working in the city. He has like a sort of an office job in the city, so a very low ranking one, just sort of not clerical, but fairly low ranking. And so he's supporting his studio by putting money from his day job into that. And then he's becoming more and more detached, more disaffected, more alienated. And in the end, he leaves his job and he decides he's going to be a full-time painter. He's going to really commit. He decides that he's got to take a real risk. And so he takes a crazy, ridiculous risk, and he starts painting pictures like the one that's on the cover, mm-hmm. Of nudes. And he thinks, well, I'm going to sell these. And then he starts to work with a friend of his, and between them, they concoct this plan about selling commissioned nudes to people, and the novel is about this sort of this scheme to get this project off the ground and to provide him with a living. I think, you know, as I'm not living in London and I haven't lived there for a long time, and you can probably guess what happened at the end of that project, whether it succeeded or not. But anyway, in 2007, I moved to Berlin because, you know, you have these sort of artistic ideas about sort of going and living in a great centre of culture, and you know, you want to walk in the footsteps of Knut Hamsun and Edvard Munch and David Bowie, and you know, you want to hang out near the, you know, in the cultural centre of Europe, sort of the hub. And so I turned up there, and I had no money and I had no job, and so I bought a typewriter and started writing away. And what I wrote was this novel. But as I didn't have an audience, I didn't have any outlets. I'm not sure if self-publishing was a thing at the time. I didn't have any money for like sort of, you know, like a traditional print run of just like putting it out myself. So it just got written and it got sort of put to one side. And it's only now, having been through sort of many experiences in the sort of intervening almost 20 years, that I felt ready to put the novel out and to make it public. So here it is, and now it's becoming public, and you'll be able to discuss that with me on Wednesday night if you come down to London.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. I mean, yeah, it's interesting to, well, reflect on, I know, questions of failure in a way, and I wonder if, you know, I think about a lot of my friends and people I know who are great artists, whether they're in the theatre or visual arts or writing, and you know, I mean, the struggle is real. No, and one has to say that talent or making great work doesn't seem to have any necessary correlation between recognition or indeed remuneration of any kind. You know, and I think it's fair to say that things like funding have taken a particular route. You know, academia and the art world have gone down particular paths. And I think maybe the situation is a bit more uncertain now. Like I think there's a kind of fragmentation of platforms, and the idea of any kind of like public, the idea that there is a public sort of ready and waiting for, you know, in this way as sort of collapsed. And what we're looking at is a kind of whole series of yeah, like more or less niche worlds. Like this is something that gets discussed a lot on Substack, and but perhaps there were kind of really interesting bright moments. Like I know that you were involved in hosting this exhibition called The Exhibition. That was like 2 years ago, maybe.
Yep. That was the summer of 2023. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So and that was showing a whole host of artists who are probably not really being shown elsewhere, right? Sort of British artists. And I know that you also do kind of lino cuts of sort of famous writers and so on. Should have mentioned at the beginning. Yeah, and I wonder if in that transition from the period of 2007, 2008, and then the kind of solitary typing in Berlin, are there kind of broad trends or tendencies you can...
Oh yeah, for sure. Because when I went to Goldsmiths in the 90s, so you've got to remember that this artist is based on me. He's not like a complete nobody. He went to the best art department in the entire world in the 1990s at its height, or maybe just past its height. So, you know, because like you know, the YBAs, so Damien Hirst and you know, Ian Davenport and Glenn Brown and all of those people had come through Goldsmiths in the early 90s, and he was coming through this A character, which is me, more or less, give or take, comes through in 95. So he was right there just after the apex. So he was in a really good, he set himself up in a really good situation. And he had been taught, now obviously the YBA thing changed things a bit, because it said, you know, you could go out and get yourself a warehouse and do your freeze exhibition, which is basically you, and you do all the lighting, you do all the wiring, you hang all the pictures, you do all the promo, you host the the opening night and you sell a whole bunch of art to, sort of cutting edge investors and whatever. So that mold had just been broken, but we were still coming to terms with it. So when I was at college, we were taught, what you do is you do your open exhibitions, you go to your sort of Camden Arts Centre, get Chisenhale Gallery, you get your foot in the door, then some commercial dealer will take you up, and then you'll end up at the Serpentine, and then you'll get to the Whitechapel, and the Tate will buy works by you, and there's this sort of career progression. But it was just starting to break apart at the time when this novel is set. So it's just like, no, things aren't quite the way you expect. They're not quite the way you've been taught. So the internet is just coming in. It's not made much of an impression yet, but it's just coming in. Things are starting to fall apart, and he's also starting to fall apart because he bought into this idea that, he'd have his first picture bought by the Tate, when he was 30, and by the time he was 35 or 40, he'd have a show at the Whitechapel, and then he'd have a big retrospective at the South Bank Centre when he was 45 or whatever, and that was what you were led to believe, that if you were good enough, if you were dedicated enough, you had enough skill and originality, this was just ahead of you. You just had to keep on the track. You just had to keep going, and you would get there. But it's not quite the way it was. And also the things I was learning, or the character learns in the novel, is that something that my wife told me when I recently got married. She said, art is a social business. Now, I've been taught, you're a romantic artist, you get your head down, you think your great thoughts, you make your great art, and the world will come to you. Well, that isn't the case, because unless you're getting the work out there, unless you're getting it into people's living rooms, if you're getting it into their galleries, if you're getting it into the pages of magazines, no one's going to be seeing it. No one's going to be buying it. The Tate's not going to come to your door. You have to go to everyone else, and everyone else has to say, look, hey, this guy, he's got something special. This is original. This is exciting. This is something new. So the journey that this character A goes on is like, he realizes that the art world is not going to come to him, so he has to do something. But he doesn't realize he's really got to be sharp on how he presents himself, the connections he's making, the effort he's making, because he gets someone else to do it all for him, and the other person who's doing it for him doesn't really care. They're not really interested. It's kind of a hobby for them. And so, he hasn't fully internalized the business that art is a social activity. And I think that when you finish this novel, you can see that, well, he does seem to have learned something, but it took quite a lot to get there.
Yeah, I wonder if people ever learn anything. But yeah, I mean, no, fair enough. And I think this kind of, this sort of business of self-promoting and so on, sort of what was the self-actualizing media node, that kind of thing. It was very prescient from Nathan Barley. And yeah, I mean, it's the romantic artist. I mean, but it's interesting, isn't it, to think about previous artists, writers, or painters, how few of them actually sell any work or have any recognition in their own lifetime. You know what I mean? It's like it's actually quite rare. Same would go for philosophers who are just roundly ignored for decades, and suddenly they're taken up as this great prophet or genius.
Is there something you want to tell us about yourself, Nina?
No. I mean, I get all kinds of recognition, most of it unpleasant, but that's fine. It's all part of the mythos, And
so it's an obscurity from it's a transition from obscurity to being the sort of the subject of hatred and the hate campaign, and then it's complete invisibility. So it's just like,
it's like all publicity is good publicity. Why not? But yeah, I mean, I can see exactly this kind of sort of grinding horror of like having a vocation, like desperately having to make work, to write, to paint, and but what connection does it have? I mean, I think now a lot of people are engaging in various kind of fantastical thinking around like the patron model, which has never really disappeared. I mean, there's a lot of independently wealthy people in the art world. This is the other thing that people often don't want to talk about for good reason. Like actually, who can afford to be an artist is an interesting question. And you have several options, like you say. I think it's like, well, either you get a job and you paint or make work in your spare time, which is um really difficult, right? You have to be
Mm,
completely committed, like you're often tired, you're trying to make rent,
mm,
or you're independently wealthy, or you marry someone rich or something like this, a lot of artists, so maybe, well, not a lot, some artists, or maybe you make it, you get success, but then you have to be a particular kind of person and you have to network and be agreeable. And a lot of artists and writers are not very agreeable. They tend to be like difficult creatures. Um, or I suppose the patron model. And I think a lot of people now are engaging because a lot of people are alienating and excluding from the funding mechanisms, which in any case are quite difficult to get.
mm.
Like if you look at the forms, it's like, very, very complicated. So I think now the sort of maybe fantasy, although maybe it's working in some cases, is, oh well, some person who's made money in tech or crypto will somehow want to become a patron of the arts, and I think this is like the current uh current dream, for a lot of
Mm.
people. But yeah, I mean,
I think that once you, I mean, you, I think maybe 10 years ago I realised that the levers the levers for public funding they're not really designed for hands like mine. Let's put it
mm,
that way. So you're not going to be able to pull those levers, even though you can get your hand on the lever. You're not going to be able to pull it. It's not designed for you. And
yeah,
once you realize that, it's like, oh, okay, there is not this little parachute that I can grab hold of.
I think the first time I came across your writing, actually, I did read your work on iconoclasm because I'm very interested in this topic. But I think the first thing I came across was this pamphlet that was mentioned in the newspapers at some point, which was about abolishing the Arts Council.
Yeah, so yeah, that was a pamphlet that was published about sort of 3 years ago, and it's basically saying what you think the Art Council does is not what it actually does.
Mm.
It's designed as a system for patronage. It's for people, not for art,
Yes.
and it works for specific client groups. And if you're not part of that client group, it's not going to recognise your art, however good you are.
Hmm.
And I think, in a way, actually, that's just helped. It's just freed me because it freed me from the last illusions. I mean, I'd known that for a little while, but it was just good to put it in writing and set it out. And it was just like, yes, it freed me from my illusions. It's like, no, you're not going back. There's, the Tate, the Whitechapel, the touring exhibition of foreign venues funded by the British Council. It's not going to happen. Not coming for you. Forget about it. What you were taught in Goldsmiths in the 1990s does not apply. It perhaps didn't properly even apply then, but it definitely does not apply now. You have, and also a lot of traditional galleries, even the commercial galleries, they're not quite what they were. They're not the gatekeepers that they were. You can now speak directly to people through your website. So I
Mm.
sell, it's crazy. I mean, I can sell more pictures through my website in 1 year than I can through a commercial exhibition in, and and why would I choose to have the exhibition instead? So
Mm.
it's almost like, well, you've got to relinquish the Arts Council, you've got to relinquish the traditional career structure. You've also got to start even abandoning the traditional commercial gallery model and, start doing things like you're selling prints and you're selling paintings directly to people who are engaging with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, that seems to be accurate description of the collapse of a certain model of dissemination and patronage from larger organizations to, yeah, I mean, the music industry would be something really similar. Like almost no one is getting signed. It's kind of collapsed, right, in a certain sense. So we're now in this brave new world of fragmentation, which I think is potentially exciting as well, because also then I think it allows people to write more freely. Like, for example, if I'm not writing for anyone or not for a magazine, I mean, I do that as well, but on Substack, for example, there are no imperatives around what I can and can't say, or it's not necessarily going to make me any money, but there is a freedom in being completely absented from any expectation in that sense.
Yeah, so you've got all these open channels, but then the problem is that you have to discipline yourself. You have to know, you have to
Yeah.
understand what drives you, not just not really, especially what your audience wants, but what drives you, what's exciting for you. Because people can detect, as you know, my wife commented to me recently, she can detect when you're not really into things.
Mm,
She can, people can look at posts and they can see, yeah, he's not. This isn't really floating his boat. He's, it might be an interesting thing. He might have something useful to say on it, but he's not passionate about it. It's not what he
mm.
really believes in. It's not something that he spends very much. It's not something he's going to spend any time thinking about once he's published the article. Whereas if you're really interested in something that's exciting, that is going to communicate itself to people. So you've got to start disciplining yourself and saying, well, I should only be doing the things that are really important to me, not the things that I think people would like or the think people would respect. No, you've got to do what really compels you. And I think that's what I did. That's what the character A does when he starts painting these pictures, because he's compelled by these images of nude figures, which he finds in magazines, which he starts off doing, and then he sort of transfers this to, okay, we're going to do commissioned pictures that can be similar to this. He's really into this because this is a fascinating subject. It's an exploration of the psyche of the people who take these pictures and post these pictures and look at these pictures. And this is really interesting. It's much more interesting than, say, a landscape or a still life or something, which he could do which he could do competently. He'd probably be more likely to sell, but it doesn't really engage him.
Yeah, I mean, I think this idea of like the passion or the authenticity, like finding the thing it is, exactly this, right? And if you strip away all of these other expectations, then you do discover something about yourself, or that there is a particular mode or a particular set of concerns or a visual universe. And I think ultimately, in the end, it's that is what people will respond to anyway. So you just cut out all of this garbage about expectation and the dream, and in the bad sense, like the kind of social recognition or getting funding, and yeah, just like go for it. And life is short, right?
Yeah, and that's also why the novel was written, because it was like I didn't have an audience, and I knew I didn't have an audience, and I wasn't expecting to publish it. And it was like, well, what am I going to do? I've got no job. I've got nothing to do. Well, I am searching for a job. I'm going to do some teaching work in Berlin. But like, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to just be sitting in this room because I don't have any money? I can't go out to any sort of funky clubs or anything. It's not really my scene. What I'll do is I'll just get a typewriter and I'll just write. I'll just see if I can write. And I could write, and it turned out really well. But I only did it because I was really excited and really interested in it. I set myself this challenge, and I knew there wasn't going to be any particular reward. So yeah, I mean the novel came out of that sort of passion as well.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Well, yeah, I think we're gonna leave it there as a like little short intro. But as I say, people in London or anyone who's in the city next week should come along and talk to Alexander about the novel and about the art world. I think probably we'll discuss some of these questions in more depth. What the scene is, and or if there is a scene. People are always obsessed with the idea of scenes, but it's not clear that they're what a scene is. Just like a bunch of people hanging out and trying to like get each other interested in their work, maybe. But yeah, and yeah, so once again, the sort of new novel is The Naked Spur, and sort of this other novel was this other book of paintings. Did this come out exactly the same time?
Yeah, it's a slightly different story behind that, but that is basically a book of pictures that relate to the novel. So
Yeah.
in the novel, we've got descriptions of paintings that this character is making, and they are descriptions of paintings that are in that book. That book will be for sale exclusively through Verderam. So through the venue that's hosting the speaking event on Wednesday the 28th, they will be the exclusive vendors for this. It may be available online through their shop later on. I don't know.
Okay, cool. So you have to come to in person to Red Rat, and you should anyway, because like people spend too much time online, and actually the reality is we have to get back together and hang out in person with all of the complexity of that, all of the social antagonism, all of the awkwardness. Like we have to re-socialize ourselves into this exciting world of, desire and passion and miscommunication and all of that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, well, I'll see you in person next week, and yeah, thank you for taking the time to speak to me. Um, Brilliant.
Thank you.